Welcome, good morning. This is our first office hours of what I think are many textile office hours over the next few weeks. So that's great. I don't have any really strong agenda today. So if those of you that are joining have specific things that you want to learn about, or if you have specific questions, technical questions, or idea questions, or anything in general, feel free to either add those to the chat, and I'll just I'll go through those and answer them. Or if you want, we can get you mic'd, and you can just ask those, and we can have a little conversation. So does anybody have a question that wants to kick off? If not, if I don't see anything, I can jump into just kind of pointing out some of the key resources that we have and get everybody kind of oriented in the textile stack and what's available for you to use. Yeah, so okay, I'm happy to do the intro. I did a little intro yesterday in the kickoff meeting, but I'm happy to just kind of go through that again. Let me just bring that up, and maybe those of you that were there yesterday can kind of skip this part. So I'm Andrew. I'm with Textile. We're here to support teams that are building on Filecoin. Generally building on Filecoin, but then specifically for the slingshot competition. And the reason that we're here supporting is because for the last few years, Textile has been really dedicated to building developer tools on top of decentralized networks. We've focused a lot of energy on building developer tools on top of the IPFS ecosystems and stack. And then more recently, we've put a lot of attention into building new developer tools on top of the Filecoin stack. And our objective when we're building these tools is to help onboard developers faster, help you figure out if your idea will work on these networks and move quickly to the next idea, or double down and go deeper into your idea. And so far, we've seen that a lot of technologies built for decentralized applications and for applications in the blockchain and peer-to-peer protocol space are difficult for developers to figure out if their idea will even work initially. And so we like to talk about internally, we have a KPI that might sound a little backwards, but we call it time to failure. And so what we really want is developers to have a very rapid time to failure. And that's super important because developers need the ability to figure out if their idea will even work before they can figure out if they can dedicate real time to making it a product or releasing it to releasing it to the public. And so time to failure is super important. And the way that you do that is you have easy onboarding, you have simple tools for getting access to these protocols, and you have quick ways to build an idea, even if it isn't the perfect, most idealist version of that idea. Just build it, see if it works, and then improve all the pieces after. And so our tools are really focused on that metric and getting you APIs and systems that you can attach to quickly. And so we teamed up with Protocol Labs during this competition because a lot of these tools that we've been building on the Filecoin space are now ready for you to get your hands on and start testing and start building with. And we want to be there to help you do that. And our reward for doing this is that we get a ton of feedback from you going and testing things, telling us where it's not working, and then we can improve those things before mainnet. And so your feedback is super important, and it's one of the most valuable things we can get right now. So also thank you for showing up today, because this is the start of that. And so you can think of Textile delivering kind of four things. The three things that to start with are infrastructure, and I'll give you a kind of a tour of this in a second. But infrastructure is we are building a stack on top of the Lotus implementation of the Filecoin spec. So we're building a stack on top of Lotus that allows application developers and system developers to use Filecoin as a storage API in their stack. And that system is called Powergate. You can run Powergate on your own. You can go to the GitHub repo, you can check it out, you can start running Powergate. You can connect to the testnet and do all the synchronization and use those APIs. We also have a super easy to use localized mock of the network called Localnet. And that's really for you to start. If you want to use Powergate, go look at Localnet. It lets you spin up the whole thing and start using the entire API in just a couple minutes. And you can use that for local development. You can use that for your continuous integration. You can really see how your application will work on the network before you push it to a real running network with real miners like testnet. Another piece of infrastructure we have is those Powergate instances that are connected to testnet. You can run your own, but we're also offering hosted versions, hosted instances of those for teams during this competition. And so I'll share with you how to get that. We have API and access control. So a lot of applications that will be built on Filecoin are going to need to think about who's really responsible for the data being stored, who's paying for it, who gets access to these APIs that are being provisioned. And so Powergate doesn't have any strong opinions about that. It's really for application developers and system developers to put their own, put it in behind their own systems. But Textile also offers a system called the Textile Hub, which has all the API mechanisms for you to do user management and give API access to users and to applications and embed in mobile and websites. And so we can talk about the Textile Hub a bit, but the Textile Hub is where one of the primary implementations of Textile Buckets exist. And you can think of Textile Buckets more or less like S3. They're dynamic folders of data. But different than S3, when you push to a bucket, it exists on IPFS. And so this is a way of managing dynamic folders on IPFS. And since we've started working on Filecoin, we've added to the Textile Hub actually a Powergate instance. And so you won't get the full Powergate API from the Textile Hub, but you can do a lot of Powergate Filecoin and Powergate things, such as if you have a bucket, you can call an archive command, and that archive command will send the entire current state of the bucket to Filecoin, create a deal, store that data on Filecoin, and give you back the metadata about that deal. And that's all wrapped up together into a very comprehensive set of APIs. And then the last thing is scaling, interoperability, docs. These are all things that we work on and think about a lot. And so we're kind of here as a resource if you need help thinking about how to scale your app using our APIs or using Powergate. If you're thinking about how to format your data, how to get your data onto these networks, or if you're just looking to learn more and go deeper, we spend a lot of time on documentation and can point you in the right ways. So a little bit on the deep dive of Powergate. There's a ton to unpack, but just kind of like the mid-level view here of the technology. It's actually a stack of technologies. So it takes the Filecoin network and has an opinion. So whereas say Lotus is a very flexible sort of node that doesn't have any opinions, but it means that you're going to have to build components on top of it to make it work in your system. Textile built Powergate with some opinions about how to use Lotus within a system. And so the way it does that is every Powergate deployment is a stack of technologies. It includes a Lotus node. It includes an IPFS node. It includes the Powergate sort of running system and state management, and includes the APIs that it exposes, and it has a few different client libraries for connecting to it. Powergate, when you store data, it's managing things like your wallets, so creating and managing wallets and what sort of deals and data each wallet address is responsible for. So that those sorts of state, that sort of state is managed by a Powergate. It also does things like helping you better select and filter which miners a deal is being sent to. It helps you manage things like replication, a lot of those pieces. And so we can kind of get into that today or in later office hours as well. I'll go through these actually off the slides, the links. So Textile Buckets, alternatively, is it was really built as an IPFS solution first. So thinking through how to deal with dynamic folders on IPFS. That was really the key motivation of Buckets. But now with Filecoin, it offers a really neat way for taking entire folders and snapshotting them to Filecoin. And what's really cool is I'll show you an example of this, or where you can watch an example of this. But Buckets is essentially it is a peer-to-peer protocol for pushing dynamic folders, and so you can actually run bucket daemons on a bunch of different computers or servers or wherever, and you can actually have them pushing and synchronizing folders with themselves. Textile, we run sort of a very large bucket endpoint on the hub that will let you push your folders to the hub. That's really useful for an IPFS user because you can build an application that is creating data on IPFS and then pushing it to a remote IPFS node, which would be on the Textile Hub. And then that source of the data could go away. So like if it's on a laptop, they could close their laptop, but that data would still be live on the network because it would have been pushed to the hub. But that sort of introduces this reliance on the Textile Hub, obviously, as an API. And so what Filecoin lets us do is actually get back out of the way. And so when you push data to the hub, what you can do is call that archive command, which you see here in the CLI example. You can call that archive command, and it will take that data set, store it to Filecoin, give you back the information about getting that data, the information about where that data is stored in Filecoin. You can take that information and leave the hub, never come back again. And you could go to the Filecoin network directly and always get that data back out from Filecoin, which is super cool because now you don't have to believe in the hub at all. And I'd love you to believe in the hub, but that's the wrong way to build an API. You don't have to believe in the hub, but you can use the hub to help scale your applications, help onboard users, but have this connection to a decentralized network for storage, which is awesome. So it's super easy. It takes literally 3 commands to get your first data onto the Filecoin network. You create a bucket through the initialization command. You push whatever data is in the folder where you've created the bucket, and then you call this archive command. And archiving is a full set of steps to get data on Filecoin, so it may take time. It does take time, but you can leave and you can come back later and check the status of that, and you can watch it live. And we can get into some examples of that as well. But definitely, if you've not done anything on Filecoin yet, this is a really great place to start because you don't really need to do any setup. You can install a command line tool and already be getting data on Filecoin and watching it unfold and getting a sense of what's going on, and then moving deeper into Powergate or into other APIs. But it's also a great tool to build applications or build pipelines on, and so you can do that through the command line tool, through the APIs, or we have a JavaScript client, for example, and again I'll show you that off these slides. So again, infrastructure, API, and access control, scaling, interoperability, docs, those are all things you can lean on us to help or give you feedback on. And we'll be here in office hours. You can find us in the Filecoin Slack, and I'll give you a couple places to find us there. But then the last thing that I think is really one of the most valuable things coming from Textile is that we're building a really strong community of developers with a lot of different perspectives about how to build apps, how to deliver real value to end users, what this looks like to bring decentralized networks to end users. And they're really driving us to build better APIs and to scale the hub and to scale each of these components. And we're learning from that every day and kind of just building better technology that then you can use. And so definitely share your ideas if you're building on Textile and kind of tap into this community because they're also very active and always seem to be willing to give feedback and help share the things that they've learned. So. Okay, so that's kind of the intro to Textile and why we're here. So let me see here. Okay, so let me jump into this first question here, and then after that I'll kind of like show you a couple different resources online. If I'm designing a system to have an availability of response times of less than 30 seconds, what are the requirements that are needed for an IPFS node to have approximately 10 terabytes of data available so it doesn't have to go to the Filecoin storage layer to get that data, as it would take too long to respond to the user request. Well, that's a really interesting question. And okay, so that's not actually a good one for me to answer. I am like the worst infrastructure person around. So a couple thoughts here. So it sounds like you want an IPFS node that can handle 10 terabytes of data, or a series of IPFS nodes like what's available in IPFS cluster that can handle 10 terabytes of live data on the network. We are joined by one person that I think might have some ideas here. I don't know if Peter, if you're still around and have any thoughts here about resources, maybe to point this person to, that could be a really good start. Yeah, there he is.
Yes, hello everybody. To give some numbers, the team at Protocol Labs that runs the infrastructure that supplies the proofs, the proof parameters for the Filecoin network serves about 2 terabytes of data from, I believe, a 3-machine cluster. And those machines are not they're not like too out there. I believe I'm almost certain they're AWS instances, but don't quote me on that. So what you would need to do something like this is basically, first of all, you need to test a lot because it's not only the type of hardware that you need, but also how your data is chunked and organized. For example, for the proofs, every single block that we have is a custom 1 megabyte large block, as opposed to the host IPFS, because we know that those are incompressible data streams that they cannot be used partially. You basically need to download the entire thing no matter what. So depending on your data structure and the type of access that you're interested in, are you always going to be looking at the entire thing? Are you going to be looking at parts of the data? You basically would need to benchmark this, because we do not have a large amount of applications of this type of scale built in an open manner, from which we can kind of derive public information that we can share. But Dominic here could possibly build something like this, and then we'll have more info on how to proceed. So yeah, specific wise, you don't really need any specific resource that I can think of. Everything scales relatively linearly. Latest Go IPFS had a number of fixes for memory usage and things like that. So yeah, the only thing would really be fast disks, fast network, and testing your setup before you deploy it in production.
Yeah, cool. Super. Thanks very much for jumping in on that. I think so. Fast disks, a lot of testing. The data architecture is super important here, but I think he hit on one thing that I think is really key, especially for people that are new in this kind of community and ecosystem, is that if you try to build that and you do it in an open way with a lot of really good kind of lessons that other people can follow, whether that's benchmarking or writing up the progress process and what you find along the way, you'll be a hero in this community. So I definitely encourage trying these things, but doing it in a way that other people can learn from, because I think a lot of people go and try these things a little bit in a vacuum, and it's very impossible for us to then answer for the next person what happens when this occurs. And so definitely consider that idea of go and try this, do it with some testing, and figure out how to share that with everybody else. Okay, cool. So without another question currently, let me just share just a couple of those resources that I wanted to point out. So, okay, so the resources are pretty straightforward to navigate. The first main one that kind of can be a good landing point to find all the rest as far as the Textile stack goes and what we're making available is the doc site on Textile. And I'll just kind of point you directly to a few key elements on here. The first one is that if you want to give that 3-line command, it will be 4-line command actually if you've never used the hub before, because you'll have to create an account first. But if you want to try that sort of 3-line command for creating a bucket, pushing the bucket, and starting your first Filecoin deal, the things that you're going to do are in the documentation under the getting started. So you'll just basically go over the installation and setup of the CLI. And we have builds of the CLI for all major platforms. So you can go get the CLI, install it, create your account. And then the next thing that you're going to do is jump down into the bucket storage component here. And you can read through this. The key thing that you'll want to get to is the archiving flow. So once you've created a bucket, you can read through what's happening when you store that bucket on Filecoin. And this is pretty brief, but it does also have links to a couple of neat things. One of which is an actually aging already. Things move so fast. It's a little bit of an aging blog post, but it contains a lot of things that are really good insights on how buckets work. And so that might be very interesting to you, especially if you've been building on Filecoin or sorry, if you've been building on IPFS, or if you are interested in building really interesting data workflows on IPFS. We've done a lot in buckets that you could leverage or learn from in synchronizing data across IPFS nodes. And this blog post goes into it more than any place else. But sort of the hidden gem in this blog post is until the end, and it's about it's where it talks about what happens if you want your bucket on Filecoin, and specifically this archive command. And in this blog post, there's this video, and this video shows the exact workflow I mentioned before, which is creating a bucket, pushing that bucket to the remote Textile Hub. So now your data is on IPFS, but it is managed on a node behind sort of the Textile set of APIs. So now you want to ensure that that data exists on a decentralized network like Filecoin. And so then you'll archive the bucket and take the data about the deal. And in this video, he goes off to a Lotus node, nothing to do with Textile, takes that deal and extracts it back out of Filecoin. So that's sort of disintermediating Textile's own API from your data, which is super cool. So check that out. The only other things, let's see, to show. So actually in our documentation, we have pretty good links here to most other sites. So, but one of them is the open source. So Textile is all open source. So if you go to our organization, you can find a lot of this stuff. But just specifically, here's the Powergate stack. So if you want to run your own Powergate, this is where you can go dig into that code. In our documentation, we also give you information on running your own Powergate. We have Docker images, and we have Docker compose files that you can run, and all of those are available, I believe, in sort of make commands. So you can sort of make build. That's for the CLI. You can make an instance that's going to connect to testnet. But really cool, and I mentioned this before, is the Localnet. So you can make Localnet, and that's going to give you the entire mocked Filecoin network running directly on your machine. That's going to be great, like practically no bandwidth requirements. It's going to set up in under 5 minutes. It's going to have the full set of APIs for you to build and test on. And so you don't need anything else to get started, actually seeing how your idea will flow through the network this way. It even has mocked miners that are going to run right on your network and accept your deals. And so you don't even need to hit a faucet to get Filecoin to use this network. It's all on your machine. And so that's a really great resource. And so again, The documentation has the overview of that. The repo has the Docker commands that you'll want to run. And so you'll see it's just this one-liner to get the whole stack running directly on your machine. And then once you've moved through that, if you've decided to use Powergate and not use the Textile Hub, but if you're using Powergate for your idea, and you've moved and you've tried out the Localnet and you've tested these APIs, and you see how your workflow is going to come together, and now you want to test it on testnet, or you're ready to actually start pushing real data to testnet, you can run this all on your own. You can deploy this to your own set of servers or on your own stack, and there's instructions to do that. We also are offering, like I mentioned, hosted Powergate instances that we run for you and give you access to the full API. And if you want to get one of those, you can find this link all over, but the hosted Powergate request form. So I really recommend getting through the Localnet testing step before you apply here, so that you have a sense of what Powergate actually does before you are requesting these. Because when you request one of these stacks, we spin up a fully synced Lotus node, a fully capable IPFS node, and the full Powergate stack, and give that to you. So this isn't a small request. This is a pretty big piece of infrastructure that we give you, that then you can start using. But make sure that you need it, and that it makes sense for what you're developing. So that's a little bit more on the docs and links to share. And I see a few more questions here. I think about the performance of IPFS. What we should do is get you probably connected to, I actually didn't show, I think, yeah, sorry, there's a question about performance and finding the GitHub repo for IPFS benchmarks. I was just gonna say, I'm just the wrong person to ask for that, for IPFS benchmarks specifically, but I can help you get directed towards some people that will be able to point to resources and existing info. And so what I didn't show is that we have 2 channels in the Filecoin Slack. So let me just do one more thing so I can put this on the screen. Okay, so if you're using Powergate, we have a Slack room in the Filecoin Slack. So if you've not onboarded to the Filecoin Slack, which I assume most or all of you have, here's the URL to get your invite there. Once you're in there, you can find a room called Powergate Users, and jump in there, and you can ask questions, get feedback on your ideas throughout the competition over there. And we really recommend jumping in there anyway, because a lot of people are asking questions that you'll be able to learn some things from along the way. This is really like where the community exists, and so should be a resource to most teams, even if you're not asking questions. And similarly, if you're going to go down the Buckets route, or you're interested in the Buckets route, there is a brand new channel called Buckets Users, and you can find that in the Filecoin Slack as well. We also have like more general textile users in our own community Slack, but if you're in the Filecoin Slack already, don't feel obligated to go join that. You can find us right on these 2 dedicated rooms. So Buckets Users, Powergate Users. And so with that, I think that this outstanding question about the Filecoin benchmarks, if you want to actually just jump over to the Powergate Users and just ping me or ask the question generally there, we can get you kind of put into the right places to have people answering that question for you, I think. Okay, cool. And then Peter mentioned, this is just for people watching the video later, that there will also be a session on Wednesday where they'll touch on some of these topics about IPFS and IPFS scalability, and that the material for Wednesday is still being prepared. So getting these questions actually into Slack also will help them remember that these are the types of questions that are coming up, and make sure that they get them covered next week. Cool. So if there are no more urgent questions, maybe we can all go back to the async Slack chat world, and I'll be there all day. So if people, if you just didn't ask your question or hasn't popped in your mind yet, grab us on one of those two channels, Buckets users or Powergate users, and we can get you answers, or we can get you links or resources over there. Sound good? Okay, and then one more note for the video reviewers is that all upcoming events are on slingshot.filecoin.io, so you can find whatever else is coming this week, next week. I have some master classes coming on using buckets, on using Powergates. I have more office hours, and then all the teams at Filecoin have a bunch of different office hours and events that you can tap into to learn more. Yeah, super. Thanks, everybody.